we're starting today. We're starting a five session series on the five faders, and we're going to talk about how to be the best at each one of the five faders. So, because if you don't understand the concept, if you don't have the language to talk to your team, if you don't understand yourself, you're going to be frustrated. You're going to drive from place to place, not get what you want, and every Sunday after Sunday after Sunday, it's going to be annoying and frustrating. So that was a good segue.
Okay.
Thank you, Kevin.
Sure, anytime.
Here's how we're going to roll today. I'm going to give us a quick description of the faders just to give context, kind of the three main learnings from the faders. And then I'm going to have you tell us some stories. I would love to hear some stories. Once we describe the artist, I'd like to hear some stories of healthy artists that you guys have experienced, and especially unhealthy artists that you've experienced, because I think we've all either been or have been around people who have a certain bent, certain motivation, and they like bring things to life, or they drive us crazy. So that's kind of the flow of what we're going to do this morning. Cool. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you.
Post-COVID, Tony. Into the ad-libbing world. Oh. All right. So let me go in and let me give us just a quick orientation on generally the five faders. The five faders is a concept. It's a motivational typing system, kind of like the Enneagram. It's not a description of who you are necessarily. It's a description of what drives you, of what motivates you. It answers the question, in the worship context, why are you doing what you're doing? Why is doing this way important to you? Why do you show up the way you show up? Why do you prepare the way you prepare? Why do you lead worship the way you lead worship? Why do you do all these things? What's driving you? That's the idea of the five faders. And so there's five different faders that any worship leader can be classified as, or be motivated by. And this goes for the leaders, this goes for the teams, this goes for your techs, and even the church has kind of a fader bent to it, but we're not talking about that today. So the five faders are artist, shepherd, priest, educator, and producer. And the short description of each, the artist generally wants to create beauty, wants to express emotion through the music, has a really clear picture of what things should sound like and what things should feel like sonically. They're thinking about the sound, they're thinking about the art in the thing. There's lots of emotion and things that are put into the music, and they can get really bent out of shape if things don't sound right. So there's a lot of energy in that musical piece. Shepherds primarily care about the people, like you would imagine. They'll make adjustments to rehearsal, depends on what the people are doing. They shape their decisions. They plan their music around what do people need, what are people expecting, and they want to make sure that people are cared for. They want to be that safe place for people. A priest is kind of this pure worshiper. They're very vertical in their orientation. They're thinking all about meeting with God, all about the presence of God, all about how can we do everything, how can we make every decision so that the end goal is met, which is creating a space where people can meet with God. They have that instinctively, innately. They're just doing that, and they're prophetic. They're often spontaneous, and they just love to linger with God. Educators really just want everybody to be well equipped. They would say things like, I just want you to know what you're doing. Let me explain this to you. Here, let me help you understand how this works. They're the teachers, they're the mentors. They're the people who are helping us do things well, do things the right way. And lastly, the producer loves, to be organized, loves a well-planned and well-executed service, loves things planned out in advance. They are the planners. They know what's happening, several moves ahead, right? So that's really broad, really quick overview on the five different faders. But there's three really, really important ideas about this concept. The first idea is a concept of your best self. You can't be the best version of yourself if you don't know what motivates you, right? So if you're an artist per se, I love the clarity of this description. If you're an artist, you can either be a craftsman. If you think about what a craftsman does, they take raw material, some wood, some, whatever they have at their disposal. They take something and they make beauty and usefulness out of it. They're able to make something that works, that is able to, so like this isn't beautiful, but I'm sitting in my little fire rancho, little fire fort. We have a little fire ring there. And I built this thing. It's not beautiful, but it's functional out of like scrap next door, right? So like that's what an artist does. They take junk and they take raw material, not necessarily junk, that because we're translated to people and people are never junk. They take inexperienced, unskilled people and create beauty from that, because it's amazing. It's magic what they can do. But they can also be demanding rock star divas, unfun to be with, 3-hour rehearsals, just is terrible perfectionists, really unhealthy. And basically what that tells us is that every motivation can be healthy or can be unhealthy, can be integrated to who you are, or it can be disintegrated and it's just a mess. The other day, my brother-in-law was talking about these worship leaders that just love God, want to get in the presence, don't have time for getting things right, so to speak. And I said, well, that just sounds like an unhealthy priest, because it's not that motivation is we want each of these motivations is wonderful as part of our team, but if you don't know how to be healthy, if you don't understand how you're motivated and then understand how to be the healthy version of that, things aren't going to be good. So you can't be your best self. That's the first concept. You can't be your best self unless you understand what your motivation is, and then what are the ways that you're being unhealthy, and what are the ways that you can be healthy in to be those things. So that's the first concept. The second concept is that understanding this on your team enables you to have a culture of honor and a culture of value. When you begin to understand each other, you can say, oh, like, man, I'm so glad that you're an educator, that you bring that strength to our team. You bring that wisdom to our team. Or if you're a shepherd, you bring that sense of community to our team. Man, I need that, because I'm just focused. I'm a producer. I'm just doing and doing and doing and doing. And you're saying, hey, let's stop and connect. And I can be like, why do we have to talk and pray for each other? I just want to get to the music. It's like, no, I value that. We need community. We need each other. And until I understand that I have a certain motivation and a certain bent, and you have a certain motivation and a certain bent, and those bring value to our team, those bring good things to our team, it's really difficult to have a good culture of honor. And so this language helps us to bridge that gap and to understand each other and to be able to value each other. And then the third concept is that it allows us to be love responsive. And that simply means, what does love require of me in this moment? What is needed? Because at every moment, the reason that we call these the 5 faders and not the 5 motivations is that if you think about faders on a soundboard, those are the things that people push up and down to make things louder or softer, right? As you're mixing, as you're making an appropriate balance, you're moving those faders up and down, and good sound guys are doing that. They have their hands on the faders all the time, and they're just making these small adjustments, moving as the moment demands, right? So how do we be love responsive? So if I'm the priest and I just want to meet with God and I just want us to sing in the Spirit and I just want us to linger and flow and be spontaneous, and my congregation is like, what is he doing? I have no idea what he's doing. Are we supposed to sing? This is so awkward. Martha, I'm sitting down, like instead what needed to happen in that moment is say, that fader is there for a reason. We need you. Take your educator fader though and slide that puppy up and say, pull out your Bible right now. Turn to Psalm 104. Read these first 3 verses. We're going to sing from this. You'll feel a little bit weird maybe, but let's just try this together for a minute. These are your lyrics now. Like your Bibles are your lyrics. Let's sing to the Lord, as it says, a new song. And that might change, completely that moment. Like, oh, okay, well, this is weird, but at least we have direction. At least I'm understanding a little bit about what we're doing. Or maybe, I needed to have prepared for that. and been a bit more of a producer instead of in the moment. I'm like, oh, I'm seeing blank stares. I should probably do something, shouldn't I? You know, instead of closing my eyes and just getting lost in love. So maybe I should have prepared and say, okay, after song 3, we're talking about this theme, this topic. It actually comes from this scripture, and so I'm going to pull some scriptures out of. I'm going to find those references, and in Planning Center, I'm going to put in here. This is where we're going, and at this point, actually, can you put those verses up on the screen? And so now these are your lyrics. Now make up a melody, guys. This is going to feel weird, but let's do this. So love requires of us lots of different things, and if we understand where our faders are naturally, like my fader naturally is the shepherd is the lowest. It, like, I have to be like, okay, think about others, think about how I'm caring for people, think about how others are perceiving and experiencing this moment. How can I help them along? And so I've had to learn to do that, to put my faders up and down, because love requires things of us. So the third idea is being love responsive. So being the best self, having a culture of honor, and being love responsive. So let me go a tiny bit deeper with the artist, since that's our focus today. And then I want you guys to tell me stories. Are you ready to tell stories yet? You'll get there. Like I said, their healthy expression is that of a craftsman. The unhealthy expression is that of a diva. Excuse me. Their focus of attention is on the product. What are we creating? What is the end product that we have, that we're delivering to the congregation? The virtue that they bring to things is the sense of beauty. They're the ones that make things look good, sound good, feel a certain way. They fear really sounding bad or looking bad. And they feel a whole lot. They're very, very, very full of emotion. When they are healthy, they have this sense that, I'm creative. But when they're temptation, they tend to be perfectionistic, and when they're trying to protect themselves, they have this defense mechanism of contempt, which basically says, you're not as good as I am. I'm an artist and you're just a peon. You're not where I am. You don't think like I think. You couldn't make a beautiful music, beautiful sound if you like, they get into the sense of contempt because they're trying so hard to create beauty, so hard to sound powerful and to express this emotion through art. They really want the church to kind of regain its prominence in the world of art. It's not just like, oh yeah, that was back in the day where these famous composers and sculptors and people in the art world came from the church. But today it's like, no, it's the world that's leading that. Like, we just need to regain that. There's this feeling they have to do. So if you're trying to get along with with an artist, you would show up with your stuff learned. You would have prepared beforehand, before rehearsal. You would ask this artist if hey, did that sound musical? What I just did. You would show up and you act like a professional in the sense of you work hard to create beauty. There's energy spent in this endeavor to create beauty as we're leading worship. You would get better at your own craft. You would always bring your personal best. You would do things and all these things to help you to help the artist meet their goals. So
Dave, yeah.
One
of the things that you said to us before, I remember about the artist, which helped me a lot, was to remember that their biggest fear is being associated with bad music. Like that's their worst fear. Worst nightmare is that the music is bad. And so looking at it from that perspective, it's easier to understand where they're coming from, I think.
Yep. Yep. So with that description in mind, think of some artists, and may be us, right? We might be the artists in the room. Talk to me about some unhealthy or disintegrated artists that you've been with, and of course this goes out, so
no names.
Yeah. or for our example, you can just all call him Alex the artist, because Alex can be a boy or a girl, right?
Uh-huh.
So Alex the artist. Crack myself up.
What do you got, Mindy? Come on.
Well, yeah, I think a lot of what you said, as far as with the where it can be unhealthy, I can see that in when I do my one-on-one meetings with the worship team members at the beginning of the year, and just kind of ask them, with this new year, are there things that they want to, what do they want to change or improve on, or, in how they lead or whatever. And when you get feedback of, I just want everybody to be able to play as good as I do, that's an artist in a unhealthy role. And it's hard to know what to say to that. I basically just said, okay, so that's everybody else, but what about you? I was asking about you.
My goal for myself is to have the rest of my team play better.
Yes.
I want to play with a better band. That's my goal. Which, I mean, it's interesting to frame it that way, though. Did you hear what I just said? I want to play with a better band.
Uh-huh.
Right? Like, that's a reframing on, I wish everybody was as good as I was. So what is it going to take for me to play with a better band, other than leaving and playing with a better band? Like what?
Mm-hmm.
How could I use my energy as an artist to help that? Because it's kind of like leadership. Like, are leaders born, or can you grow leadership? Well, leadership is a skill that you can grow and you can develop. There's personality types that are more classically leader influencer types, charismatic or whatever, but really the same thing is true of artists. There are some like people who have natural giftedness, but creating great music is a really practical, tangible skill. Like if you take an okay bass player who doesn't have the greatest pocket, doesn't create this sense of pull and groove, and let's say you have them play with the metronome for a season to get them to have a better sense of pulse so that they can play around that pulse. They've just never had that sense of lock, so they can't play with others very well. And if you have them play with the metronome for a while, that might give them the sense of like, okay, there's something that is outside of me that is setting this common sense of pulse, a common sense of time with the team, because we don't have that as a team. So if we play with a metronome to help us learn that lock that we all have to agree to, suddenly I can start playing around that, and we can share some of the sense of that. So if I'm an artist and I really care about that, I have energy that some of us don't. The rest of us don't have the energy to put into like, hey, could we try doing this to develop these 3 skills this year? So my question to that artist who would say, who is unhealthy in that, I might with this language be able to talk to him about, well, how is there positive energy in what you're saying? If you want everybody to be as good as you are, that feels really condescending, which is typical for an unhealthy artist. And so maybe there's areas of your artistry that you're not healthy in the way you see yourself. But how about this? Because I really value what you bring to the team, because you bring beauty to the team and you'll help us create better music than we can otherwise. Could you pick like 2 or 3 skills that we could focus on this year? Like what do you see if you're looking at our team and you're thinking like they're not as good as an artist as you are, as a musician as you are? What are a couple of skills, like practical skills that that you notice about the way that we play that don't match your level? So what are like 2 things that you really think that we could grow in? Like, put that back on them. You know, I want you to be a healthy artist, and I want to mine that thing that you bring to us. You know, help us see what is it that is, you know, because what will Alex say? Will he say, well, I don't know, they just need to get better? Well, that's not good enough. Do you really care about this, or don't you care about this? Figure it out and bring to me 2 things, 2 areas, 2 skills that we need to get better in. Or Alex might say, well, it's our sense of time. We just drag stuff, or we start and we always go too fast and it just gets out of the pocket and it feels terrible. Or, you know, we just do lame songs, you know, or like, I don't know, you know, what his response would be.
I think his response would be, they don't practice near as much as he does. They're not near as prepared as he is. Yes. I do agree with that. I mean, that is probably the truth. Yeah.
So,
because it, like you said, he's an artist, so he's more interested in how it all is going to sound than someone else who is a priest or a shepherd, you know. So there is going to be different levels of how much, I mean, I think we should all be showing up prepared and taking the time to do that. But I think even in that, there's going to be some different levels of what that looks like for the different 5-faders. Is that right?
Sure.
Yeah, I think the important thing to understand about artists are that they, you know, they're actively caring at all times about the beauty, about the effectiveness, about the artistry of what they're doing, and they can't understand why everybody around them doesn't care. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of frustrating, you know. Mm-hmm. So that's the tension. So it's not always, well, the people aren't as good as me. It's just like, well, I don't understand. Why don't people care? Like, nobody's practicing. Like, I really care about doing this and I'm practicing. Why wouldn't they? So sometimes it is flat out arrogance, immaturity, and you've got to address it, you know, like, hey, you know, I hear what you're saying, but, you know, can you hear how you're saying it? And sometimes it's just that, like, man, why doesn't anybody else care? I don't understand. And they genuinely don't understand. Like, I don't understand why people wouldn't want to play their instrument better. Like, I'm perplexed.
Yeah. I like the way you say that a lot, Tony, because that keeps the artists from sounding like they're just jerks. Like, because they really are. Like, I don't understand it. You know, like, why wouldn't you? And so, I mean, one of the things that we do with the 5-faders is we pair people up. You know, we pair low with high. I'm a real low artist fader. I want to learn from a high artist fader. Now, obviously, that takes humility to do that, but it could be interesting learning for your team. You know, if you would go through this concept with them, you know, have them watch the video and then talk about it at some point, and then say, so, you know, Alex is kind of our artist here. You know, he's the one that cares a whole lot about this. Alex, would you mind telling us what's your preparation before you get to rehearsal? What do you do on a week in and week out basis? Like, what's your preparation? You know, and kind of let their jaws drop. It like, you spend how many hours doing what? You listen how many times? Wow. And it might start with like, you're crazy, you know, or I would never do that. And that would be a very normal yet unhealthy, uncaring response, unvaluing, unhonoring response. So you would have to coach them through that. Like, how can we respond to this? And, you know, as your leader, I'm not saying you need to do this. I'm saying his artist fader is higher than ours is. And we would do well to learn from him, to learn from his discipline in preparation. You know, because you can talk about, like, it would be interesting to talk about as a team. Okay, so on a scale from 1 to 100, on each song being like ready to play, what's the number that you think you should show up at rehearsal at? Is it 10%? Is it 0? Is it 95? What's your number? You know, just to get them to commit to, you know, this idea of what does fully prepared mean? How do I show up to rehearsal prepared musically? What does that look like? You know, because is rehearsal my like catch all, like, this is where I get my feet wet, this is the first time I listen to the song, and, you know, we start working on it, and by Sunday it'll be fine, you know? And that's when you cue the Switchfoot song, more than fine, more than, no, not anybody? Nobody knows that song, more than fine?
I do.
Okay, anyway.
Does not compute.
All right. So that's, yeah, I mean, that's because that's a real and you think about Alex's world for a second, and this is kind of back to what Tony was saying. Think about how he feels every week at rehearsal. When every week at rehearsal, once again, he's like over prepared. So it's like he shows up to a dinner party and everybody's in shorts and tank tops and he's in a suit. It's like, oh, I overdressed for this moment. You know, that's how you and you live that way, and you're always feeling like this oddball out. Like, that tension's going to burn him out. You know, and so you've got to do something to help the artist. You know, I went into this conversation thinking about how I can be the best artist. But I think this is really helpful to talk about how we can help our artists be the best version of themselves. You know, which is what we're talking about right now. So anyway.
It's interesting that you talked about rehearsal and how to approach things in rehearsal, because I think that's a weak area in a lot of people's arsenal. A lot of people are just, let's barrel through this so we can get out of here, and, you know, which would bother the artist. Because the artist is like, I've waited for this all week, like, and everybody's just like showing up late and leaving early, and we're not even anywhere near ready.
Yeah.
So but that rehearsal time is a great time to just model like community and kind of the whole 5 fader thing. And a good leader is able to look at their team and say, okay, there's clearly a struggle here. Things aren't going well. You know, Alex, the artist, you know, what would you do to kind of get over this hump, to solve this problem? Like, or it could be your producer, arranger, going to them and saying, this song isn't working. You know, my producer, what are we missing out here? And bringing them into that as, like, you know, kind of what Dave was saying, valuing everybody's participation and saying, listen, we all play a part here. I'm not the greatest arranger, producer. I'm just called to lead in this season. But I don't really hear those things that my producer hears. So I'm going to ask him or her so that they can contribute, and bringing that in and communicating that value in a way that doesn't get out of control, you know, because there are people on your team where if you give them the floor, practice is over. They're just going to talk for the rest of the time. So there does have to be some guidance there. Like, listen, we're here to practice, but as you do that over time, you build that culture. It's like you're building a healthy culture. And I think that's, and maybe that's a different fader, is, you know, that person that sees what they're doing as long-term. I'm building a culture here. This isn't just about surviving to get through Sunday. Like, these are people who I live and serve with, and I'm probably, hopefully, going to be with in heaven. So, like, let's enjoy being together, and let's enjoy serving our church, because this is my family, you know? And that rehearsal is a lot more enjoyable to be at than the one that's just like, I don't even like you people. I just want to get this through and get out of here, you know, and please don't ask me a question. Please don't say anything. Please don't interrupt me, and don't take us off on a tangent. You know, just let's, you know, that's not really as fun to be at. And that's not a fun worship team to be on.
Yeah.
So I wonder how we could bring that in, you know, make those rehearsals more effective so that we get the job done. We rehearse, but we also build community, build culture, and encourage our team and honor them for their contribution. And, you know, I mean, these are all things that honor God in the way we interact with others. And that's just as much worship as singing a song. It can be.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really good. I love that. I love that framing, you know, and imagine if you intentionally did that for each one of your faders, excuse me, that are represented on your team, and draw them out and say, hey, can you lead you know, you're the shepherd. Can you lead something to connect us, to build community for us tonight, like 15 minutes? You know, can you do that tonight? You know, hey,
you know, another thing to add to that, for more clarity, is not all of those things have to happen publicly. Like some people on that fader, it might be more appropriate privately to say, hey, I know that you would never speak out in front of everybody, but I know you're thinking.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so, you know, this person does really well at addressing the team, and there's respect there, and they respect what they say. But this person I'm going to meet with, you know, for breakfast or, you know, after, and say, hey, I know you're thinking about this stuff. What, you know, I wanted to draw you out. How do you think we could improve this? So not everybody is going to be put on the spot publicly, and not everybody you want to give the floor.
Right.
Some people, you know, like, oh no, I'm not going to ask him a question in public because we'll never get anything done.
Yeah.
You know.
That's good. That's good awareness. Any other, maybe one more story about an artist that's unhealthy that you've experienced or been?
I don't know if this is what you're referring to or not, but the characteristics of perfection could affect after a service has been finished, and then you go home and beat yourself up the rest of the day and the next week because one measure or one ending didn't go the way you planned it. Or so that's for the perfectionist. That's some place to learn, like, you know what, I gotta let it go, because after it's done we learn from it and go on, but not to judge the whole service by one mistake.
Yes,
that's good.
That's a big deal. I mean, let's sit there for a second. So perfectionism is kind of this is where we get stuck as artists, and that is a framing of the world that says 999 notes wrong. I mean, right, one note wrong, my whole world is over. Like, right, what? Like, logically, that's like, that doesn't make sense, but we feel that way. We like, oh, and I was like, did it, and it was sharp instead of flat, and I was like, oh, that's horrible. And it wrecks our week, right? It literally like can do that. Like, I don't understand that, but I understand that it can happen. You know, I was like, man, just think more like a jazz musician. You know, we make mistakes. It's part of the music. We turn them into the music. Let's do it. Let's play that same wrong note the next time around. You know, make it something. Like, so, but let's. How can we help other than, you know, the Bob Newhart stop it? You know, how can we help the artists who struggle with that sense of perfectionism? You know, how can we help them not think that way? You know, I mean, Mindy?
I think it's important to just constantly be, you know, reminding our team that we aren't up here to be perfect. You know, we aren't going to do everything perfect. Far from it, you know. And I mean, I'll be honest, perfectionism is something I struggle with. And not so much in hitting a wrong note because I don't play an instrument, but just in, you know, after I sit down after the service and then things start going through my mind of, oh, I should have done that, or I shouldn't have done this, or, oh, I wish I would have thought of that, or, you know, and just kind of replaying how the whole worship just went. And I'm like, no, I got to focus on the message. But because I'm a perfectionist, I'm prone to do that. And so I really have to just keep saying, you know what, God, I know I'm not going to be perfect, and it doesn't matter. It's done. Like you said, what was done was meant to be said and meant to the way it was. And we just bring excellence. We bring our best, we give our best, and you know, just constantly reminding your team that as well as yourself, if you struggle with it like I do.
Yeah, I think it's important to be balanced on that, and sometimes those things become, you know, pastoral things where there's people out there that need to be reminded, you know, that your identity isn't tied into whether you hit wrong notes or you make mistakes. Like that, you know, God has, you know, sent his son knowing that we were sinners, knowing that we made a ton of mistakes, and he's redeemed us. So we're in, you know, our entire worldview is redemptive oriented, you know, we're like, God is redeeming us, you know, so that's not a failure. And yet there's the other side of it where people say, well, it doesn't matter, make a joyful noise, you know, hey, you know, it's jazz or whatever, you know, people have their excuses. So it's like, no, we want to aim up here so that when we miss, we hit here, instead of aiming down here, and when we miss, we hit down here, you know? So it's being balanced and just realistic about it, and just saying, hey, you know, it's going to happen. Yeah. And I think it's extremely helpful to have a format of breaking that down as a team and saying, hey, what went wrong? You know, what went right, what went wrong, that type of thing, so that everybody's aware of it, and we're all growing, you know, nobody's perfect here, you know, but we're aiming, we want to understand where we went wrong so that we can work on that, you know, instead of just wallowing in self-pity. That's not helpful. But there should be a format to discuss that at the end, whether it's email or whether it's meeting together 10 minutes, you know, after the service, and just while everybody's packing up their gear, just, you know, hey, what went, you know, man, that tempo was really strange, and, you know, I was playing bass and I was pushing it too hard. That was my fault. I understand that. You know, just helping everybody kind of analyze, but not overanalyze, right? It's not morbid introspection. It's helpful, you know, graceful understanding, you know?
Yeah.
One thing we're starting to do now that we stream our services as well, because we didn't do that before. And, you know, for years, I've always was like, I wish we could see a recording or hear a recording of ourselves, you know, to learn from. And now it's like every week. So, you know, so I'm really encouraging the team to go back and watch the worship and listen and just, you know, just see, you know, what areas did we, and then when we come to practice together on Thursday nights, you know, just kind of have a quick little time of, you know, talking about it, and what happened that was really good, that we felt like, you know, was a great moment, that, you know, what are some areas that were distracting, or, you know, things that we could improve on. And so I think, you know, kind of using that and, you know, discussing it after they've had some time to view it, listen to it, you know, is helpful. So
great tool. That's a great tool. It's
painful.
It's funny.
Yeah.
As I'm you know, helping people with their streaming and getting it better and getting it to sound better, a lot of people are frustrated because, you know, they look at it and they're like, this is terrible. And, you know, it doesn't sound like this Sunday morning. And I'm like, well, actually, you know, this is exactly, you know, what it's like. And you just haven't been aware of it because you haven't had this tool. But it's a tool. It's actually helpful. Now you can look at it and you can see, you know, where things aren't going well, and you can address them. So it's that same mentality. Either we can look at that and just say, and be mortified, like, that was terrible. I quit. I'm never doing this again. Or we can say, wow, okay, I see what's happening here. Like this, now I know what I need to work on. And that's a much more grace-filled, hopeful, you know, God glorifying way to look at that problem than, you know, oh, I look terrible, or I played terrible, or I'm the worst, or everybody, you know, doesn't like me. That's not helpful. And I think I think what would be great now, again, you're managing people's time. So this is a very idealistic idea, but I think it'd be a fun exercise once every couple months to, instead of rehearsing, bring everybody together and watch a couple of these things and just remind everybody of what we're working on. You know, hey, tempo was a little squirrely in this song. Does anybody feel that? It was kind of weird there. Or, you know, everybody's looking at their music stand and, you know, nobody's smiling. Nobody's looking like they actually are happy to be there. You know, what's your countenance look like? You know, these things, it could be really helpful. And, you know, buy some pizzas and hang out and get to know each other. And you don't even have to pick up your instruments. Just talk about a couple different things. You know, watch a few. I think that'd be really helpful. But again, that's probably my fader, because I'm the guy that's like, how can we get better? Like, we got to work on this. Like, how can we improve? Where can we go? So that maybe that appeals to me and not others, but.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that is a super helpful tool. I was just like, maybe one of the ideas that God had with the pandemic was, okay, we're actually going to help our worship teams to get better, because they're going to watch themselves and be like, you know. So, but I you know, I love what you said, Tony. And I think we forget this. I think it would be helpful to say this occasionally to our teams, like, you know, I don't know what everybody's background is, and as far as a team, you know, have they played out in secular arenas, you know, were they in bands? You know, there's a whole different culture that we're operating in. So, you know, it's dog eat dog. You know, when you play out there, everybody's judging what you're doing, and everything is really easy to reflect on your value as a person. You know, but the kingdom that we're playing in has different rules, you know, and even the whole idea of like, yeah, while I was yet a sinner, while I was yet not great at my instrument, Christ died for me. Like I have to feel that, you know, and we because it's so different from what's in the world. We're an American Idol culture, you know, on the outside. Like, don't let that thing seep into the church. Like, that's not us. We play with our personal best every time. The metric as artists isn't perfection ever. It's growth. Am I better than I was yesterday, last week, last month? Are we able to create something that sounds nicer? Are we able to be more comfortable and more authentic in our expression of this music? You know, do we own it more than we did last time? Like, that's the growth that is stewardship, and biblically that's what we're called to, not perfection. We're called to stewardship, right? I mean, yes, there's a scripture that says be perfect, design perfect, but I'm not going to unpack that right now. But that's not, you know, when we're creating music, we are in a different set of rules. And it's not like you were saying that, Tony, the tension, it's not like, well, this is just church, you know, punch that thing out of here, because that's not what the Lord says. If you read anything about God with his people in the temple and the history of how he's journeyed with us, like, there's slacker is not a part of that culture, you know.
Right.
You know, mailing it in, no, that's not. Read Malachi. for that one. But okay, are there any glowing, like, man, there was this artist and he or she just did this thing, or we saw this healthy, you know, what's an example of something that's beautiful and delightful? Because there are downsides to every one of us and every one of our faders, but there's beauty in it and there's value in that. Any stories or examples of things you've seen that way?
I think we've talked about a lot of them, Dave, you know, just that they do care, they take pride in their, you know, what they do. They show up on time, they're prepared. Like there is a lot of good things to an artist, you know, as well. Yeah.
Did you use the word delight?
No.
I think so. Something, maybe Tony said that earlier. It just triggered in my head. I was trying to think of something of a person that I've experienced do something, and there is this sense of delight. There was a guy who he was playing, I think he was playing electric guitar, but he also played penny whistle. You know, that has a little slide to it, right? Is that? I think that's
a slide. No, a slide. There is a slide whistle.
A penny whistle is like a little tiny guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, and it was the song "Resurrecting." And it's got this melodic da 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 da, which is usually piano or guitar or something. And he said at rehearsal, he's like, "Hey, do you think I should play that on my penny whistle?" And I was like, "Sure, try it." And it was just like every time he played, I was just like, "Oh, that is so." I'm delighting so much in that sound and that, because it has a very, very different kind of like a. From the other side of the world, up in the north, Scottish,
Irish.
Yeah, it's got that tone and that feel, and it almost like brings the whole emotion of that to that song. And it's just like, that was a moment where this artist had this idea and went with it. And it was just like, it was a tiny little thing, but I still remember it. I was like probably 4 or 5 years ago, and it's still like, like that's what artists bring, I think.
Yeah. I think it's so important to not, you know, I think the tendency for some people, if you're not an artist and you're leading, is to feel threatened by the artist. Mm-hmm. Right? And that's, you know, anytime we feel threatened by anybody, you know, that's a time to redirect our priorities, right? Because we're not supposed to live in fear. We're not supposed to be anxious about anything. You know, we're following God. God is the leader over this. He's ultimately leading me, and I'm leading these people. You know, so there's that sense of like, no, the artist doesn't threaten me. The producer doesn't threaten me. No, nobody threatens me. God has put them here to give us a thing that is this community. And everybody needs to adjust that fader on some level, you know, to be more balanced. And I think, you know, it could be, you know, one element, like this is slightly not necessarily what we're talking about, but related. We have a guy in our church who's an amazing violin player. He plays for the Lancaster Symphony. He's an old guy. I mean, he's in his 70s, maybe older. And he doesn't play on the worship team because he doesn't play contemporary music, right? But it's beautiful to every once in a while, a couple times a year, they'll have special music or a song, and they'll bring in some string players, which is totally out of character for our church. But it's so beautiful because we get to hear him play, and he's an artist, you know, to the core. That's you know, that's a beautiful thing. Like, people look forward to that. So maybe it's, you know, having that piano player that's classically trained that just hates having to be told all the time, don't play so hard with your left hand, stop playing, you know, da 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 da. You know, maybe saying, you know what, this week, you know, or whatever, you're gonna play the prelude, or you're gonna play a special music after the message, and you're gonna cut it loose, man. And we're just gonna say, thank you, Lord, for this beautiful music, you know? And that's great. Like, let them have, you know, encourage them. Don't clip their wings. Don't be afraid of them. Try and figure out, okay, Lord, you've given us this person. How can we best use them without them, you know, taking over, you know, or without, it's like, how do we honor them without them, you know, like giving in to their idolatry, you know, their own idol worship, you know?
Yeah.
It's like, you always want to be putting it in its right place, but you want to give honor where honor's due.
Wow.
And if you have that, if God's given you a beautiful artist, like, how can we use that? How can we show other people? Because the other thing that gets lost in that is beautiful music and beautiful artistry begets beautiful music and beautiful artistry. Yeah. So all those kids that are sitting out there, you know, if the music is bad, you're not going to have anybody on your worship team, right? If the music is good, these kids are hearing it, and I like that. I want to do that. Can I take piano lessons? Can I take guitar lessons? I really like when so-and-so does that thing and it makes that sound, you know. That's what you want. You want to create a culture where things are, you know, where people love the beauty and want to be a part of it. I want to do that. I want to learn how to do that. I want to play the guitar. I want to do that. So that's another element that's happening. So to put somebody who's performing excellently, that's spent years of their life practicing and getting better at their instrument, to put that before people and say, this is beautiful. We value that. We don't worship it. We worship God, but we value this because it's beautiful, right? That's appropriate and helpful for the community and the culture.
Yeah.
And it honors God because he created that person and gave them the gifts to be able to do that. So again, we don't worship it, we honor it. Two different things.
Yeah, that's good. Like give them a solo, you know? Give them a spotlight for a moment to like you said, highlight the beauty that God has given them. I love that. One more thing, and I want to read. I've written kind of a description for the artist in the healthy sense. But is there any other examples of a healthy artist that you've experienced? All right.
No, not that song.
Maybe there aren't any.
But there are. Let's see. Oh. Wait, I had one on my head. Oh yes. So I think this is one other way that the artist doing their thing inspires us. So there's this guy, his name is Andy Aiken, drummer. And there would be moments, I remember like being out in the congregation, and I for whatever reason, I wasn't connecting with worship, with what was happening. And, you know, it doesn't really matter why. I don't remember why, but I would always be able to look at him and watch the sheer joy and delight of making music that he was just playing and worshiping, and the way he was playing and the look on his face and the ways that he would sing sometimes, and not Mike, but you could just tell, like you could see it's like the Eric, what's his name? The guy in Chariots of Fire, you know, when I run, I feel God's pleasure. Eric
Yeah.
Little. When I run, I feel God's pleasure. When I play music, when I hit these skins with these sticks, I feel God's pleasure. And I could see that in him. And I would just watch him for a bit. And then I'd be like, oh, I can, yes. And then I could respond. And not, again, I wasn't worshiping him. I was inspired by his sheer love and the gift that God had given him. And I think that's a piece of each of the faders. There's such a beauty and such a gift that God has deposited in the way that they do what they do, that inspires us. It inspires worship, that draws us into that thing. And so, imagine if they didn't let him play, or if, he wasn't up in the mix, or, just if we couldn't experience that gift, if we never made space for that gift, we'd be missing out. So anyway.
Yeah. The other thing along with that is, maybe it's important that we spend more time highlighting the wins instead of how we're just not there. Like we just didn't get it. We played it wrong. The tempo was messed up, and that can be discouraging after a while, depending on which fader you are. Maybe it's important that we spend time and saying, man, that was like the artist, you nailed it. That thing, that turnaround that you did, oh, that was really excellent. That's where people, that creates this thing of like, hey, I want to do something like that. Not in an unhealthy way, right? Not in a, why doesn't anybody recognize me? But like, that was beautiful. I should practice this week and see if I could do something beautiful. I mean, that's okay to do that, as long as it doesn't fall off the other end of like, selfishly comparing yourself to everybody and I can do that, or why can't I be as good as that person? That's not healthy, but it is healthy to say, man, I'm going to try something here. That was cool.
Yeah. That's good. Well, let me read this description. Do you want me to share my screen so you can see it too, or I don't know if that's helpful or not? I'll just read it. Share my screen? Yeah. Okay.
Sure.
Let me share my screen. All right. The artist. I don't know if you can even read it or not, but it's on the screen. You are brilliant, sparkling, insightful, creative, captivating, moving, inspiring. This is the artist. As a true craftsman, you are able to transform raw materials into beauty. You create the best kinds of surprises, unexpected twists, resolutions, motions, dynamics, all soaring and lifting us into another realm. Your boundless creative energy refuses the mediocre, the happenstance, the common, the done already. You push us. You call us to greater levels of transcendence, and your genius inspires us. Your glow causes us to glow. And it's not just you that shines. You make us shine. You draw us into your world, calling us to higher heights, greater depths, wider spaces than we ourselves could have imagined. Under your influence, we create what we've never been able to do on our own. We gain access to a magical world with your passport. Nuance, shades of color, tones, pockets, energy, melodies, movements, head swaying, facial contortions fraught with emotion, stank, tension, wailing, hooks, tears, bouncing limbs, glances of shared enjoyment, selflessness. These are your world. As an artist, you have such pleasure in creation. And though it's so personally fulfilling, your expression is completely devoid of gratuitousness. It's as if you were as thrilled that you got to experience it as the listener is, even though you were the very one creating it. You embody pure childlike wonder. And jazz was definitely the right music to listen to in writing this description. I'll stop there. That is the artist, right? Hopefully in a vivid nutshell. And if you think about what that person brings to the team. You know, I think the conversation has at least helped to unlock some ideas, both motivating us to champion them and to bring them into the forefront in moments, to give them a voice, to give them honor and value in our team. But then also hopefully to give like some practical ways of doing that. So any closing thoughts that you guys have?
It's very helpful. Is this written somewhere that we can buy? Is that in your book, or is that someplace? Is that coming in a book, or is that?
It is coming in a book. Yes.
Okay.
That's the
okay.
Yeah. So I've had this for a few years, and I need this. Part of why I'm doing this series is to help motivate me to actually put it in the books. I have some things written, but it's still coming. So
good.
At this point, you know, if you want to know about the faders, you can go and watch the talks on our website. They're all there, and the notes are there, so you can watch that too. So, yeah, I love it. So, I think it's gonna. I've seen it unlock teams' potentials. I've seen it help relationships. You know, I've seen it give teams the language to really be able to move forward together in a more effective way. So,
how would you recommend like sharing that with your team? Would you do like it all at one time, like set aside a time to go through all 5 of them at one time, or like each week, you know, just set a little bit aside of time maybe to just go through one, you know, one of the 5?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, what I've done before is like either in a session, you know, or as part of a retreat, you know, I'll teach that to the team. But if you would want to have them like just watch the video online and then say, hey, it's the kind of thing that, you know, depending on how they're engaging it, if they're really like bought into it and they were excited watching the video, you know, you could spend half an hour at a rehearsal talking through it and like applying it. But I mean, I feel like it deserves the time to like, hey, let's sit down and let's talk through this, you know, at a special time, you know, let's meet for a couple hours on a Saturday or something, and and maybe watch it together and then talk through it. Yeah. You could do that, you know, or you know, if you could figure out how to do a Zoom and have me teach it and then talk and then lead through like I have in the handout I have. Let me see here. This is on here, yeah. So I have these questions for discussion. So, you know, is there anyone exactly like you? How will this help you grow? How can it potentially sharpen you? Like, you know, a common fader. Is there anyone mostly like you? What are you like? How are you different? You know, I like this one here. You know, that was amazing. What would make you say that about a rehearsal? So if you know, asking each person, you know, in the best of all possible worlds, what happens on a Wednesday or, you know, at a rehearsal that would make you feel ready to go into Sunday as an artist, as an educator, as a priest, as a producer, and have each person respond. But then the real question is, the real interesting questions is, hey, I'm a really low shepherd. Who's the high shepherd? Tell me how you think about rehearsal. How do you prepare for rehearsal? Huh? Malanga. Wow. My wife just found a plant. She's going to go plant in the garden. So fostering the conversations that can help each other mine the strengths that each other bring, you know, kind of, and that's kind of why I said that about your artist. You know, it's like, okay, tell us how you prepare. So that's like super fascinating for each other to hear. Like, I mean, and that's that outside of the fader conversation, it's helpful for a team to sit down and say, I want each of you to tell me how you prepare. And there's no judgment here. We're going to try to not judge you for spending no time before you come, or spending 5 hours or 10 hours before you come. Like, we just want to know, like that would be helpful to any team. But with even with this fader concept and the language of the faders, that can really be helpful to understand. Okay, so artists, how many hours do you spend in preparation? Producers, how soon do you begin preparing for rehearsal? You know, when does that start for you? It's like, well, you know, we get the music 2 weeks in advance, and I starts that day. I do most of my preparation the week before the week of rehearsal. You do what? Oh my goodness! I think about that the day before. I start looking at it and like, you know, like, oh, prepare. You know, so like, so you know, if you can figure ways of helping them mine each other's strengths and learn from each other, you know, that's the real value in it. And because then you can begin to understand and talk with them about moving forward. So yeah. But your question makes me think, you know, as I write the book, you know, does part of it have like a, you know, like let's design it so that teams can work through this together. You know, let's talk about this, you know, each week. And I know that all teams are different. You know, like some teams are like, we have one team and we meet every week. Okay, well that would work for you to go through that every week. But what if you have like, you know, no set teams and you have 30 people, you know, in your worship ministry and they're always different? How do you do that? You know? Okay, well then for that, I hear you typing, Kevin. I hear you typing.
I'm trying to get on to our website, but my internet is down, so I'm just on my phone.
Oh.
I was going to say to Carol that on the website, there is the faders description and has a lot of that information that you shared already.
Yeah.
Just thank you. It's always inspiring to be with you all. Thanks to each of you, and thanks, Dave, for your input.
Yeah.
I went out to get parts to fix our frozen pipes. And so first I went to Home Depot, and there was a line of about 30 people out the door because the store was already full to capacity and they were letting somebody in when somebody else came out. So I said, no, I'm not doing that. So, and it's also raining and cold. So it's like 35 degrees and raining. So, and I didn't have an umbrella. So I thought I'll drive down to this other Home Depot, which is like 7 miles away, but traffic is crawling because there's still on the road from Sunday. So I drive to this other Home Depot and same story there. Long line, not a lot of people going in and out. So I thought, well, I'm just going to go. I thought about while I was sitting there, I thought, you know what, one of these little hardware stores in my town, maybe it's not going to be busy like a Home Depot. So I drove to my local hardware store, and when you know it, there was a line there, but it wasn't that long, or like maybe 15 or 20 people in it, which is still long, but not that long. And so I sat there in my car and waited, and I was just watching what was happening, and no one came out, no one came out, no one came out. Like, I sat there for about 15 minutes and no one came out. So I thought, this is not going to be good. So then I thought, all right, I'm just going to go to Walmart and get a couple of the groceries that we needed. And then when I got to Walmart, the line was, I'm not kidding you, 100 people long. It was ridiculous. So I knew of this other little out of the way grocery store, which has really high prices, but I thought, well, maybe they won't be that full. So I drove by there and there were only 5 people in line. I thought, this is great. I'm going to go there. So I went there, parked my car, got in line. I was like number 6 in line. Almost immediately after I got in line, somebody came out with a cart full of groceries. And I like said something to the lady in front of me. I said, you know what? I said, it might be all gone by the time we get in there. And we all laughed, of course. And then they let her out, but they didn't let anybody else in. And then about 3 minutes later, like the manager comes to the door and says, sorry, we're closed. So the people that were waiting, I was only waiting a few minutes, so that wasn't a big deal. So I think, all right, I'm not going home empty-handed. And I saw that when I drove by that the Wendy's drive-through was open. And I thought my kids will at least love it if I go to Wendy's and get Wendy's. So I get in the line. I was sitting in the line for about 25 minutes, and I finally get up to order. And the lady at the window says, "We're only doing premium sandwiches. We can't do any of the 4 for $4s or Frosties or anything." It's like the only way I can afford to buy for the grandkids and everything is if I can get this 4 for $4 deal. They get a burger and chicken nuggets and fries and a Coke or whatever for $4. But I'm not buying them a $4 sandwich, you know. So I said, "Give me a Dr. Pepper," and that's all I want. And I went through there. Then on my way home, I think, all right, this is great. My favorite pizza place was open and hardly anybody inside. There was one guy inside the door. So I went in, I saw that big open sign. I go in, I say, "I'll tell you what," and I know the guy. I said, "I'll take 3 large pizzas, 1 with pepperoni and the other 2 plain." And he says, "I'm sorry, but we're out of pizza dough." "We're out of pizza dough, but we have wings." I said, "Give me wings. How many wings do you have?" He said, "As many as you want." I said, "Give me 4 dozen wings and 2 orders of fries, and I'll take that." I said, "I'm not going home empty-handed." And so that's what I did. So that was my 3-hour excursion yesterday. And by the time I was done, it was almost getting funny, but it was very, very frustrating afternoon, I got to tell you. I left at 1 and got home at like 3:45. So.
Wow.
Good for you, man.
But all is well that ends well. We have heat in our house now and no electricity, but we have a swimming pool, so we can still flush our toilets. We take buckets of water out of the swimming pool and pour it in the tank, and then we can flush it. So
you have no electricity?
We have electricity, but no water.
No
water. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and the electricity is hit or miss because they're doing rolling blackouts. It's like on for 4 hours and then off for 2 hours, on for 4, off for 2.
Oh my.
So if I disappear, that's probably what happened. Just let me know.